Welcome back to another episode of the Marketing Measurement Matters podcast with Tim and Tim and special guest Luca today with us, partner at PyMC Labs. Hi, Luca. How are you doing?
Very good. Thank you very much for inviting me, guys.
Yeah, happy to. Where are you actually located at?
New York City. I'm in a rainy day here in New York in a WeWork. My daughter is sick, so it's not such a bad day, but I mean, like, I'm very happy to be here with you guys.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, here the sun is shining, but it's getting a bit into autumn. But let's not talk about weather, maybe as in terms of how to include weather in an MMM, but not how the weather is in New York versus Hamburg. So maybe for the start, how did you get into marketing analytics? What was your career so far, and what got you excited about it?
Oh, it did happen a long time ago, a little bit by chance. So
By
after
chance as
I
well?
actually, I come from an academic background, and I did something completely different. I did computer vision using neural networks, and at that time, a friend of mine was in the startup world in Berlin, and he hooked me up with this VC called Rocket Internet. And they literally hired me to build marketing analytics, data science practice at that company.
Wait,
And
give me a sec. Just a quick chime in. That's another one who's coming from science and does marketing analytics, right?
Yeah, we just had that common thread also when we last spoke to your dear colleague about with Thomas Wiki, about how many scientists go into marketing analytics, more or less by accident.
Right. And I think I actually brought Thomas into marketing analytics because before joining PyMC Labs, I was a client of PyMC Labs, and I hired them for the first marketing analytics project at that time with HelloFresh. That's right. That's right. Yeah, and so Rocket was fun because they literally one day they told me, you have 100 million budget, just do whatever you want, just maximize the revenue for us. And so you really had to play with the incredible amount of money and talent and people that wanted to do big things. And so I started there with marketing analytics, MarTech, AdTech automations. There was also components of machine learning and AdTech. And then I started building from that. And I think the biggest role was when I was in HelloFresh, and then I had to build data department from ground up. So it grew from just a few people to almost 75, 80 people when I left. But a big part of that team was really marketing analytics. As HelloFresh, which is a Rocket company, they used to spend about 800 millions at that time in the US in marketing across a lot of different media channels, TV, direct mail, Facebook, and so on and so forth. And so there you really had to think thoughtfully how you measure the ROI of this ginormous investment. And then that was the time where digital measurement was disrupted because of the privacy changes that had happened. It was around 2018 or 2017 even. And you had to come up with variants of media mix models then to measure. And there was this seminal paper from some Google guys that started applying Bayesian media mix models. We re-implemented it first in PyMC and brought it to a certain level. And then we asked for PyMC Labs expertise to measure more like fine-grained details of these models. For example, at that time, it was very easy to write models that were variant of linear regressions, but things like Fourier coefficients for seasonality, time-varying intercepts, which are advanced modeling components, weren't available off the shelf. And so we started adding that to what became then the library, which is called PyMC Marketing, which is the library that has the most downloads nowadays in terms of open source media mix modeling framework.
Yeah, I remember we had a call where you already were at HelloFresh, and we had this sort of knowledge exchange, and you mentioned that HelloFresh was going all into MMM and not worry that much about digital attribution and user journeys that much anymore. That was quite interesting and also inspiring for us. where we thought, okay, MMM is really becoming important now.
Yeah, at that time, it was really like a pivotal change, I would say, in measurements, because we had just come from the experience of the Apple privacy changes and other changes in privacy that really disrupted digital measurements. Now, what I would say is that it's always a great idea to do to have different attribution models that measure different things, and to do a lot of experiments. I mean, media mix model is one. It's not the ultimate solution, although you can think about it as a framework that can bake knowledge that comes from causal experiments that you do, live tests that you do in the markets, even like marketing managers' expertise or other attribution channels, by baking that knowledge into the priors of these models, and tweaking these priors allows you to get something that's in the ballpark. So it's a very flexible framework that allows you to incorporate other things, but those other things are important too. You shouldn't forget.
Yeah.
One question on marketing mix modeling, Luca. So you've been with MMM, I think, for about like 6 years now, 7 years perhaps, since the Google paper came out, and then you started dabbling in Bayesian methods for marketing mix modeling. And what I noticed is that back in the day, back in 2019, 2020, even 21, people were all focused on how do you fit a marketing mix model, right? How do you get the adstock right? How do you get the saturation right? And then, okay, right, maybe now we have that problem more or less solved, right? We can use PyMC Marketing, for example, or vanilla PyMC, or many other different great frameworks out there. What do you think the new frontiers are? What are the challenges that we are facing now, since we got the fitting problem more or less solved?
Yeah, it's a great question. Let me think a little bit about this. I do think there are two different directions here. So, first of all, some models have become, even like sophisticated ones, have become relatively off the shelf. For example, if you want to add nonlinear effect, as you said, like adstock and diminishing return, you can fit them in the model with PyMC Marketing super easily. You can even have sophisticated things like time-varying coefficients. You can have Gaussian processes for modeling nonlinear effects. You can add interaction across the channels. You can add hierarchical models. All this stuff, it's really just a few lines of code. Now, how you put that together to represent your business models is actually still a little bit of an art. And the interpretation of these media mix models, once you want to go from coefficients to an explanation that's in business terms, it's still relatively complex, especially when you have nonlinear effects and nonlinear interaction across the channels. So I do think one set of direction is to solve the translation problems that basically makes this media mix model interpretation as easy as possible for business, and the ability to run that continuously and get the insights at the fingertip. And for that, actually, we're working very actively on these problems with PyMC Labs. Thomas has already talked about this in this podcast, but we built our belief is that agents, AI, generative AIs, they are universal translators. They are very, very good at explaining things like I'm 5, for example. And so they can take a very complex model and allow you to run simulations in natural language without you having to know the intimate details of the model, but the agent being your translator and your interface. So that's one topic we are really working towards. The other one, I would say, it's more complex type of business models. For example, if you are a ginormous business, like really have the scale of a Coke or a Colgate or other businesses that are like have many different product lines, they have many different regions, it's really hard still to fit the model at the scale of you have a matrix with 100,000 of rows, 100 columns, and you can get to that dimensionality if you fit some of these gigantic models in a hierarchical fashion. So that's still really hard because you need to run them on a GPU, you need to optimize your code base and so on. But the other thing is that if you want to model very complex business models, For example, some of our clients are two-sided marketplaces. And two-sided marketplaces, it's not really clear how you model the acquisition cost of demand and supply, because they're often connected. And if you don't have the supply, your cost of demand will increase, and the other way around. And so these are very complex and nonlinear models that are actually very hard to measure in practice.
So do you guys remember that? Because I mean, I worked at FreeNow, and at FreeNow, Atriba also had the big fund to build marketing mix modeling. And I think what you say is completely right. We never really looked at the cost of the demand acquisition because it was just way too difficult.
Yeah.
So I think we always boiled it down to just having an acquisition business where we have taxi drivers on some side and we don't even care about them. But I think to model this properly, that's really tough.
Maybe before we dive into further technical details, just because your steps are quite interesting, but so at HelloFresh, you've been responsible for measurement and MarTech, but you later on also took the role of the CMO, so basically the one responsible then for the results being implemented of a measurement system. How did that change? Because I don't know if that's perfect. I always ask myself,
from our point of view, it's perfect.
If I would ever have to go into the CMO role, would I actually want to do that? Like, would I really trust the results of a measurement system?
From the technical side, you know everything. There might be other soft skills.
No, I mean, we also discussed that sort of evolution of CMOs becoming more technical. But I would just be really interested, because you don't have someone on the pod that that has gone through this transition. How did that change you and your thinking of actually becoming a CMO?
Yeah, that gave me a lot more empathy for marketing people than I had before, I would say.
Before you didn't have any?
I do think so. So it wasn't at HelloFresh, actually. So it was during my tenure at Stitch Fix, and later on at Misplay that I took these interim roles while we were hiring for leadership in those companies, like a proper CMO as the background, also in branding and so on. But I thought it was extremely fun and interesting, and you understand that there is a lot more to marketing than just measurements that needs to work together, although measurement is an important part. So there is, again, branding, creative, which has, funny enough, has a big of component of measurement too, if you want to do it right. But it has also, of course, a creative aspect behind this. There is the interrelationship of managing all these teams that needs to align together to launch the right campaign at the same time. So it was extremely humbling, I would say, because as a data scientist, you often think, look, the math, they just say that you need to do this, and then on the other hand, you understand the human constraints and business constraints that are really in place for you not to action on this recommendation.
But Janos makes me a bit sad, because I was director for data and marketing at Hitfox as well.
Oh, okay.
And I would say the same. I mean, it's great to have all the digital side, but if you talked with branding and content, that's a bit different.
Different animal.
Maybe a slightly heretic question for this podcast, but do you think you can run a successful marketing operation completely without measurement?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. I mean, you need to understand whether you're getting a return on your spend. And I do think you can easily screw up a business if you don't do measurements. So you can drive yourself into a situation where you easily go out of business. I mean, I'm not going to name anyone, but there are plenty of examples of startups that didn't measure accurately their TV to CAC ratio, and they overinvested into marketing, and they ran out of money. So that's pretty common.
You often have that problem when something is totally viral, right? Then you probably don't need measurement, but when the virality stops, you don't know why, and you also can't measure the rest. That's
exactly. So there are different phases, of startups, generally speaking. I do think at the beginning you have a natural adoption, organic. If you found product market fit, then at some point you need to add paid media. So paid media is where you really have to start thinking, how much am I spending and how am I spending my money? And then you start building like a larger scale brand by putting money into brand building. And there you also need to have a framework to understand how much you allocate to brand versus direct response. And it's not an exact science yet, because it's actually very hard to also build brand measurements. In fact, we are actually building several projects with few clients around what types of model goes beyond brand measurements. And media mix model, funny enough, it's not the right answer to that. There's different classes of models. So what am I saying? Yes, you need to really think about holistically about what you want to get with marketing and be sure that you measure what you're doing.
But that's interesting. If we have time for that, and Luca, if you want to talk about this, how do you do the brand measurement right now, and what would be a good way? Because in any company I've worked at, that's always an issue because there's not enough data. It's very expensive to get the data, and the data is very human error prone.
Yeah, very, very complicated. So in the ideal situation, you have at least some data that comes
by
from
some data. You mean Nielsen, Kantar brand measurement data?
That's exactly right. So you have Kantar's and brand measurement data. Also brand searches is another typical data sets that's used. Now, the problem here is that this data is relatively noisy, and it's unclear how the effect of these upper funnel measurements relates to downstream sales and conversions. And the theory tells you, and common sense would tell you, that there is some kind of accumulation effect, your brand built over time. And indeed, there are even some researches that says a strong indicator of success of a brand and long-term economic performance of a company is the share of brand searches within the category. Now, very difficult to define a category and very difficult to identify the right peer competitor set in most industries, but that's what the theory tells you. What we come up with is variants of BVAR models. So these are kind of models that measure the interrelationship and causal interrelationship between time series. And these models allow you to basically understand what is the effect of these KPIs that are organized in a funnel toward downstream measurements. And one of the limitations of media mix models is that they measure lagged effect with adstocks. And adstocks can only measure things up to, let's say, a month or two in terms of lags. And then they tend to not fit well very, very long effect. While BVAR models, because they have an accumulation term built into the model, they can measure effects up to years along. And they're much more appropriate. There is variance that's Bayesian. And it's a very good idea to do Bayesian VAR because you can set constraints around the coefficient and make sure that the sign and the structure that they're actually modeling makes intuitive sense within your marketing funnel. And there is also a way of connecting an upstream BVAR model with the downstream media mix model and fit them all together. So this is the way we are thinking about this problem at the moment.
Really interesting. Yeah. Are you publishing anything around this, or is it a white paper on your blog? Or?
Probably yes. Probably yes.
Probably yes. Okay. Looking forward to that.
You should.
So I mean, there is already some open source implementation of BVAR using PyMC that you can use as a library, but I don't think we have. I think it would be a good idea for us to come up with a paper and a methodology and just make sure that the community can adopt it.
Yeah. We already, because I'm already a bit cognizant of time here, and we have so much more that we wanted to cover. And that topic wasn't on the agenda originally, but it was really interesting. But I mean, we got a really good introduction to PyMC Labs and the consulting versus service work and product from Thomas. So maybe we can jump directly, because I found that topic so amazingly interesting, into the Agentic AI support. We just touched upon this. Yeah. But I think you're at the forefront with that with PyMC Labs. Maybe you can elaborate more. What was the motivation to even go down that route? And are there any current practices or best practices that you would recommend for other people wanting to explore this? And what's your experience? Have you worked with clients on this? And I think that would be extremely interesting to dive into.
Yeah, for sure. So the basic idea is for us is certainly generative AI is going to change every industry. I do think an industry that's actually not clear how it is going to be changed by generative AI, but we want to be part of that process, is the data science and marketing measurements industry. And we think that a direction that's it's gonna be definitely be helpful is to assist the coding for data scientists to be able to build these models, the most appropriate model for the specific problem, by basically interfacing with an agent that help you coding, cursor style, but specialized for data science. The other direction is universal translators, where you can bridge the gap between the model and the stakeholders by asking your business questions and translating them into actionable insights and models like end results, like seamlessly. And then I would say the third direction is to run very complex simulations for which no explicit models can be built. For example, human behavior simulations for consumer research, for example. How do you model the human brain? I mean, like, yes, there is like frameworks from agents, and being a physicist, you can build this kind of like simplified models of what humans would behave in certain situations with certain probabilities. But to be honest, another more modern way to do it is to really embody a human agent in an environment, an LLM in an environment, and then have them have these take actions or think about strategies or give you answers about questions you make, and then measure the average effect over hundreds of simulations of these LLMs. This, for example, is applied to consumer research. So in consumer research, nowadays you use human panels to ask questions about new products before you launch them. And we prove that you can do the same with AI agents. And we are actually, in this direction, we are going to release a paper very, very soon exactly on this topic.
Interesting. So
synthetic panels.
Yeah, no more humans needed for actual panels. And then you configure these LLM agents as, to behave in a certain way and then,
That's right.
within certain
That's
constraints.
Right.
Okay. Crazy. Okay.
That's right. So the idea is that you can tell, hey, you are a Black woman living in Brooklyn of this and that household range, household income range, and you vote Democrats and so on and so forth. And the LLM is going to be able to answer questions then about products. So would you like, for example, to buy this specific energy drink with these ingredients in a way that the human would answer, or with the real person would answer.
Yeah.
And the way you can validate that, you can do back tests. If you have, if you are like a company like that has already a scale and had already done some previous tests, you can back test on the human panels whether the LLMs behave exactly the same.
Huh.
Coming a little bit back to the assisted coding and data science assistance use case for LLM and agents. You guys at PyMC Labs, you build an agent, right? A PyMC Marketing assistant. How does that, just for our audience, obviously, how does it look like, and what were the main challenges you had to overcome also to get rid of hallucinations and all these standard problems that are plaguing AI systems?
Yeah, so a lot. Let me think where to start. In writing data science models is complex, more complex than writing code for a couple of different reasons. So first of all, there is some technical aspects there. So some of these libraries, they are open source and evolve very, very fast. And LLMs can't keep up with that. So if you install even GPT-5, nowadays it was trained a few months ago, it doesn't have the latest version of PyMC Marketing. And we do a release of PyMC Marketing every couple of months. So this introduces often breaking changes, different ways of doing things. And so the LLM tends to not being excellent at writing that type of code. There are ways of solving this that are relatively easy. For example, adding context in the documentation that solves the type of problems. But it's an example of the technical problems that you need to solve to be able to do assisted coding for data science. On the other hand, there is the entire problem of which type of model should you write even. So if I give you an arbitrary data set, there isn't different tasks that goes behind coming up with the right answer to business questions. There is some data cleaning step. There is multiple hypotheses of which type of model would you fit. There is the fitting process of the model that itself has an optimization of parameters, task that needs to be taken. And then there is like the answer, the simulation, the packaging of the response that you give it to the user. That cannot be a single agent. You need to have a pipeline of agents that orchestrate with each other, that solve that like long-term task. So defining each agent so that it has a defined responsibility and the tools that solve that subset of the problems is actually pretty complex. And we have been working on that for a couple of months. Right now, we have a beta version of an agent that solves marketing analytics problems, both MMM and CLV. But we are still iterating on this and probably come up with a final version around November. We're going to have a release. So it's been a journey. I think we also learned a lot from interactions with clients. And I do think collecting data always of how the model hallucinates, how they deviates from the happy path is extremely important, because it allows you to iterate on the prompts, iterate on the fine-tuning, iterate on the models that are powering the agents, so that you can actually get to the correct results.
Makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. Only 2 more minutes left. I mean, we don't need to be too strict on the timing, but just another topic that I wanted to touch upon, and maybe we do another episode maybe in 2-3 months time, because I think the content is pretty amazing with you. But we touched upon this in when we had our last call about this, the potential MMM validation frameworks. And in between that call and now, you also published some interesting insights into when you compared Meridian, Google's open source MMM framework, to PyMC Labs. But overall, we also touched upon Mutinix open source. I think it's open source, right? The framework.
Open source validation framework. Yeah.
Open source validation framework. Yeah. So I mean, that's an interesting direction, because there's, I mean, with MMMs and vendor selection, RFPs, etc., that doesn't seem to be that brands have a standardized way to actually get to the ground truth of, is this vendor's MMM actually really working? So maybe you can shed some light onto your thinking there, and specifically talk about the maybe the comparison with Meridian, and also what your thoughts were with regards to Mutinix framework. I think there's a lot to cover there, and it's an extremely important topic as well. So
1 minute left.
Let's not.
Okay, maybe we can start with a simple question. Did someone from Google reach out after you published the Meridian comparison?
No, actually, we would have loved to talk to those guys and iterate. I mean, I do think that having more and more open source libraries that do marketing analytics measurements is great. I mean, if the entire ecosystem grows, we are all happy together. I do think Meridian is an interesting library. They certainly took a lot of ideas also from PyMC Marketing, and they have different flavors of those ideas implemented in a way that's very original. In the benchmark that we did, PyMC Marketing appear on a couple of dimensions to be better. And I do think the idea of having an open source benchmark is great, because you can validate the results. You may disagree with the way we did the evaluations, but everything is transparent. It's published, and we took inspirations from the Mutinix open source benchmark. But we weren't super happy with that, because the Mutinix benchmark focuses really on accuracy of fitting the models, especially out of sample, which it's kind of like not the point of the way you want to use the media mix models. I mean, like having a model that fits, it's a minimum requirements. But what you want a model that can reconstruct the actual contribution of the channels. And therefore, the way you typically validate that, and there is decades of experience in that in Bayesian science, is by using synthetic data. And so what we did, we started with synthetic data sets of different scales, and we went from the startup, like 100 rows, 52 weeks or 2 years of data, to the enterprise with 100,000 of rows, like ginormous data sets. And then we tried to fit off-the-shelf media mix model on each one of them, and with Meridian and PyMC Marketing, and try to actually focus on two metrics. One is, can you fit that data set, and how fast can you fit that data set? That tells you about the quality of the underlying sampler or optimization engine. And second is, can you reconstruct the ground truth contributions of these marketing channels? And it turned out that one of the disadvantages of Meridian is that it's built on TensorFlow probability, which is a good library, but it's kind of being less maintained than more modern, like other numerical libraries. While in PyMC Marketing, you can use flexible backends. You can use this traditional PyMC. You can use a backend that's called NumPy that's built in Rust. You can use NumPyro. And so we actually can switch the sampling process according to the dataset size to get a much faster fit, something that goes 20 to 2 times X faster than Meridian. And on the other hand, Meridian doesn't manage to scale off the shelf on the CPU to a data set that's 100,000 rows. So that's another like limitation that it certainly has. And on the other hand, so the data sets present some strong effects on seasonality. And what we saw there is that the inclusion in PyMC Marketing, you get off the shelf what is called the Fourier seasonality components. And these are very appropriate to model recurrent periodic patterns. While the way this is done in Meridian is using splines, which typically actually used to model residuals and baseline. So splines are more flexible. In fact, Meridian has way more parameters than typical PyMC Marketing model. But on the other hand, because it doesn't have this periodicity built in, it can't capture well those seasonal components, where seasonal components in the data are periodic. And in a way, that's the reason why the reconstruction error of PyMC Marketing then appears to be better for this type of data set. That's very representative of a typical marketing situation.
Really interesting. And you open source this framework, or is it reproducible?
You can go in our blog. There is a link to the GitHub repo. You can download all the code that allows you to generate these synthetic data sets and run the benchmark, and then get all results. You will be able to run the benchmark up to a certain scale. I mean, like, we run this benchmark on relatively large machine. Everything was standardized to really make sure that we can also crunch the very large data sets we apply. So, but it's all open source.
Great.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
Definitely have to try it out. Luca, great. So many really in detail topics, and thanks so much for being on the podcast. I think we'll definitely have to invite you back if you'd like to also, of course.
And
I might reach out because
I should mention that, Janos, since we are here, if you want to know more about the benchmark, we are on the 1st of October. We are doing a webinar on our side with an in detail walk through the benchmark and how we got to certain results and how they was generated. So check it on our website.
Okay, maybe we put that, or you can also put that just in the comments of this LinkedIn event, and then everybody has it for their reference. We're definitely gonna have someone from us join it.
Awesome, thank you.
Great stuff. Yeah, great stuff as always. All the amazing things that you built at PyMC Labs. So it's great to have. This is the third colleague, so to say, from PyMC Labs that we have. We had
Will, we had Thomas, and now
amazing. Yeah, cool. Great. Thanks again for being here. Thanks, Tim and Tim.
Yeah.
Thanks, everyone, for listening. And then also make sure to subscribe to our Spotify channel. And as always, please leave comments. Suggest what we can do better. Who else we should invite? Maybe someone from Meridian. I think we have someone. We approached someone, right? Okay, let's see. But yeah, thanks again, everyone, and have a great day.
Thank you very much,
Bye-bye.
guys. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.